Standing room on the London train, stag doos jostle and toddlers wail, but a spare key chimes with my pocket change.
Hello everyone, today I'm here with award-winning guitarist, singer and songwriter Sam Carter. How are you getting on?
Hi Iona, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, very nice to be here chatting to you. Yeah.
So it's week 3 and this is your presentation week in Global Music Match. How are you finding it so far?
It's been great. I've really enjoyed getting to know some new people and new music, and yeah, it's just one of those things where we've all been thrown in with such a variety of music, and I've found that really interesting, and it's just really good to get out of your, we all have our kind of listening areas that we tend to operate within, and yeah, it's been really good. It's been really fun. Yeah.
It's really interesting because we have so many people in our group from different genres per se, and I definitely find that you are the person that's maybe closest to the music that I would perhaps listen to, just because of your work within balladry. But before we go to the nitty gritty, I'd really like you to kind of define what kind of music you've been making over the years and if it's changed from when you were just starting out.
Okay, great. So I guess what I do, my practice, if you like, is that I'm a contemporary singer-songwriter, but steeped in the folk roots and traditional music scene and musical area. I guess that's what I would say. So I'm a folk-influenced original songwriter. So the songs that I tend to write tend to have bear the influence of the kind of the ballad sort of narrative tradition, and you'll hear kind of many verses, not just the kind of 3-minute pop songs. I tend to write kind of in a kind of like a longer story structure sometimes, and I think in the way that I play and sing, you can hear the influence of traditional singers that I listen to, and I also fuse that with more contemporary stuff. I play electric guitar. I've got kind of a more contemporary sound on some of my albums. I've kind of gone, each album's kind of had a different sort of feel, but yeah, broadly speaking, contemporary folk influenced writer of original songs and guitarist.
Brilliant. And with 4 solo albums and an EP out, I believe that's your solo stuff. Your catalogue is growing. I'm really interested in finding out about your structure for music releases, both before, during and after this pandemic. I think that you had a 17-day tour to go along with your album launch. And of course, COVID put a hold on that release tour, which was a significant amount of dates. How have you managed to alternatively launch your album without touring it? What was the lockdown album launch?
Well, I think it threw everybody into a tailspin when that happened, and yeah, I mean, it's been a blow to not be able to be out there and play those shows. I was going to be touring my new album, as you mentioned, which is called Home Waters, and it features a fantastic string section that we're going to be out on 3 or 4 of those dates with me, and I was super excited about that. And yeah, not being able to do that has been really kind of challenging, but I decided rather than kind of get down about it and think about all the things I couldn't do, I'd think about the things that I can do. So I thought, well, I can still be promoting myself online, and luckily I had a good number of sort of live session videos that could sort of show people what the songs were about and what the music was about. And yeah, you mentioned the lockdown album launch. So on the 1st of May, when the album came out, I just, I spent, the couple of weeks before that figuring out how the tech side of it and everything. And then I just live streamed from home, and I didn't know what kind of response I was going to get. I mean, that was still fairly early in lockdown, so live streaming was starting to happen, but it, now it's like everybody's doing it, but it was kind of like a voyage of discovery for me at the time. And yeah, it was overwhelming, actually. I mean, people were really generous with, I kind of had I don't know, my idea was that I didn't really feel comfortable asking for donations when what I do when I play a gig is work. That's our work, and it's valuable. It's not that we're just sitting there having coins thrown at us out of pity. You know, like that's what we do. We play music. So I thought I'll ask people for donations in lieu of a ticket. You know, this is your kind of ticket. And yeah, people were so generous, and I think there's a lot of love for folk musicians and folk music out there, and I think people, when the lockdown happened, people understood how difficult it was going to be for musicians, and I think I just managed to kind of ride that wave of generosity when the album came out. It was also a Bandcamp Friday, or one of the first ones on that Friday, so so that was kind of the first thing I did, and then a couple of other kind of online things going on, and I've done a few more live streams since then. But yeah, I guess I'm just doing what anybody can in this situation, and working, getting stuff happening online, which is why it's been great to do this Global Music Match as well as another thing to kind of broaden your horizons in the digital realm while we can't do it in the real world. So yeah.
I think that's really interesting, and I think bands from now on, or artists from now on, are going to be informed by this. And I don't think that we will actually see a traditional album rollout in the sense of album tour, that same vibe for a long, long time. So it's really made artists think about what their creative output is, and they've kind of rethought things. A lot of musicians right now are recording in order to release for the new year, but there might not be tours then, so who knows. I'm really interested in your writing process, because what you're saying is that you're informed from the folk traditions, but you really take music in a more contemporary step and way, and I really like that. But what is your process? Do you write mostly on your own or with others? What sources or archive material, if any, do you use to write from? What are your stimuli? That's a big question.
Yeah, great. Okay, I like that question. That's a great question. I mean, informed in the sense that I'm just always listening to that kind of stuff, but also in a more specific way. I could give an example of a song that I wrote, which is called Dreams Are Made of Money. And the source of the melody for that song is The Sacred Heart, which is an American hymn book from the shape note singing tradition, which has really interesting kind of varied roots musically, and it kind of has its home in the American South, and you can kind of hear in the music the different influences that have got into it. You've got some stuff that's sounds like African American spirituals. You've got stuff which is, you've got vocal melodies with the Scotch snap in it. Like you've got stuff where you can hear the kind of the Scots kind of the Celtic kind of heritage in there as well. There's kind of everything mixed together, as well as some more sort of European classical kind of. It's a fascinating book. But anyway, this Dreams Are Made of Money, the song tune, I basically used a tune from that book, and the original, the chorus was Glory Hallelujah. But at the time I wrote that song, I started writing it was just after the recession, the first recession that I can remember hit, 2008, and all of that stuff was going on. So I changed it to Dreams Are Made of Money. So yeah, I kind of took a traditional melody, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it? I'm sure you come across this yourself, but like the way that this melody was probably originally a folk tune. If you listen to it, it's very pentatonic. It's got this very sort of driving, it doesn't sound like what you'd consider to be a traditional hymn tune. And then, it became a hymn, and then it kind of, I feel like I've recovered it for different purposes again. So yeah, I guess that's how I would sort of work with traditional music. I mean, in other ways, I just sing traditional songs as well. I find songs that I like, I hear other singers sing them, and I'll take them and do stuff with them. With False Lights, which is the band that I'm in with Jim Morey, I have another. We did The Wife of Ush as well, actually.
You bet me to it. That was coming much later.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't say. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's forget about that for now. Okay. I think I've said enough on that one for now. But, I guess writing process wise, I write on my own, and I like it that way. I write on my own most of the time, and songwriting is something that I love, but it's a real it's a real craft, and it's really work, and I really work hard to kind of not just sometimes you're lucky and the first thing you think of is great, but not very often, and not very often as most people think it does. So I tend to be, I tend to work on stuff for quite a long time, and I'll go through quite a lot of different iterations of the same idea until I get something that really pops and really kind of, I can imagine it grabbing people's attention. Because I think now, you've got to have that thing in songs where each line kind of takes the listener on, and you don't drop the ball. If you've got a line in there that's just like a rhyme that's in there because it rhymes, or people hear that stuff and they lose interest. And so I'm always trying to kind of be careful to sort of not lose people's interest in the songs, and get something that really stands up, which is hard. So yeah.
And did you always write songs? Because I know several traditional singers have went through the same process in which they kind of grow up singing trad songs or ballads, and then it comes to a point where they are writing from the tradition. They're using the structure of ballad form and writing from that, in almost like a progression into writing just from your head, really. Did you have that process at all?
For me, the process was slightly different, because I didn't kind of start out and establish myself as a traditional singer and then go towards original writing, which some people do. I kind of started off as an original writer, and then my original writing became more influenced by traditional music, and then I started to include traditional music, and I thought, well, if I love this music so much, I felt like it gave a context to what I was doing to have those songs in there. So I think in a way it's worked the other way for me, that I sing more trad stuff, even though I'm more towards my own writing, but brought over my practice, if you like, including false lights. I do more traditional stuff now in with my original stuff than I did at the start, where it was almost entirely original stuff. So yeah, I think that's kind of the way.
Really lovely to hear. I love that idea that kind of you came at it from a little bit of a different angle, to what perhaps some people are used to hearing. That's really cool. So you've had, quite a long and storied career already, and you've played kind of all over the world, UK and Spain and Germany, Netherlands, even Kuwait and Pakistan, Bahrain.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think touring is definitely like my favourite aspect of actually being a musician. But over the past few years, I've noticed, and this is something that I really wanted to talk to you about, I've noticed that a lot of Scottish artists, whether that be folk or indie or whatever, they seem to constantly be touring in England. Yeah, I feel like English folk artists don't seem to enjoy that same level of touring reciprocated when it comes to touring in Scotland. And I think that's really sad, and we need to change that. Apart from the odd show at Celtic Connections, I'd really like to see more English artists being booked in Scotland. What's your experience of touring in Scotland out with Celtic?
Yeah, I mean, it's been scant, to be honest. So you're right to kind of identify that, and I think that is a thing, that the English don't get to Scotland as much as the converse is true. Mainly Celtic Connections has been my experience of playing in Scotland, which I love. It's so good. It's fantastic. But obviously there's a whole country there and lots of other stuff going on, lots of other gigs. I did a few little places in my first UK tour. So I did the Lemon Tree in Aberdeen. Do you know that one? And I played. It's probably not far from where you're from, right? You're from Aberdeenshire, aren't you? So
it's like the nearest venue. Like
really, there we go.
Venue, Huntly to Aberdeen, like 39 miles. I'd go to the Lemon Tree to see bands.
Yeah, it's a great venue. I think that, I mean, the clue to why we don't get up there so much might be the fact that I had a gig in York the night before, and I had to get up to the Lemon Tree for midday the next day to soundcheck, because I had an afternoon show there, and it was like, yeah, okay, that's a 5 a.m. train. so maybe that's why, I don't know. It's a shame. I mean, I wonder if it's just, I think that, Scotland just has such a strong traditional scene, and I wonder whether it's just that, maybe it's hard to sort of to want to book people from down south when you've got such a wealth of musicians in your area that can be booked for, not the same kind of they don't have the same overheads to get there. I don't know. I'm clutching at straws really. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but
I think it's really sad because like the experience of, we, the first ever time that I heard Pete Cole was when a festival in the north east of Scotland booked him. And I was so glad because
he's amazing.
he is absolutely wonderful, and he's went on to really influence some of the repertoire that I've included, or some of the versions and melodies that I've included. And I really look up to him as such a brilliant singer and tradition bearer and just all rounder. And since then I've played at his club, stayed at his house. Like that wouldn't have happened. That contact wouldn't have happened if he wasn't booked at that festival. Likewise, I think the first time I saw Martin Simpson was at the same festival in the northeast of Scotland. And yeah, it's a long way to go, but people really do appreciate it. But there needs to be more festivals like that. The festival I'm talking about is the Salmon Bothy Hal Festival, and they just have a mix of everything. But there needs to be more festivals and folk clubs like that. Like I worry that it's a more societal thing. I worry that politics plays into it. I worry that
you got to think of the wider context, haven't you, of what's happening at the moment and the relationship between Scotland and England, and I guess that plays its part, and history and all the rest of it. Maybe it's bigger than just folk music and folk musicians. So yeah, it is a sad thing because I love the gigs that I've done in Scotland. I've absolutely loved it. So I'm well up for doing a few more.
Likewise, I absolutely love touring in England. It's got such a great singing tradition that doesn't really exist in like Glasgow, Edinburgh. Like I feel like where I'm from, of course, Aberdeenshire, it reminds me of home whenever I go to a folk club in England because people actually sing. So I just think that we should kind of rebuild those bridges or build them if they, whatever. I just think it is really, really sad. It's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah.
So back in 2010, you won the Horizon Award, which is like the Best Newcomer Award at the BBC Radio 2 Folk Awards. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on these awards. They are really great for exposure and to give you profile. But I was saying the same to Christina. Listening to your music, I really think that you're an artist who probably prioritizes great songwriting, performing, storytelling over profile, awards and press. Like, what are your thoughts on these awards? It's all of them.
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing is, we all know it's part of the game, really, right? It's part of the game, and if you're in the game, when you win, it's good, right? So, as a career with a career head on, like you're better off getting awards than not getting awards. I would think, it just helps because it raises your profile and people hear about you, and it has this kind of, it's an accolade, and also, the people that, on the folk awards, for example, the people that know stuff about music, and I was really proud to win it as well at the same time. So I don't know. I take it with I'm grateful for it and I really appreciate it, and I think it has it really helped to kind of establish me, certainly within the kind of folk world, the folk scene a bit more. But yeah, it's not why you do it. Ultimately, it's not why you do it, right? You don't do it for somebody to give you awards. I was gonna do it anyway, right? I was gonna do the album anyway. So that's kind of how I think about it, and how I try to sort of keep a level head about it. Because also there are so many influences on why those awards go to certain people, why they don't, and there's a lot of kind of a lot of things, a lot of circumstances that have got to come together. So you can't live on it, because most of the time you're not going to get those accolades, because there are so many people out there doing it, so many fantastic artists, that if you're waiting for that, then you might be in the wrong job. I don't know, so yeah, I don't know. I hope that's kind of what I think about them. Very grateful, but I don't live for it.
I think it is very interesting to say, you know, we don't live for it, because we don't. But the thing is that when some promoters and some folk club organisers pick up the phone and say, "Who are you? Have I seen you? What award have you won?" That's when you go, "Oh, what?" Like, we might not live for it, but unfortunately, there are people out there who measure your worth on the award that you've won, and they won't take time to check you out on YouTube. They won't take time to do that. It's just, what award have you won? And that's really heartbreaking. And that exists. That absolutely exists out there. What do you think
Yeah.
of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a shame because I think there are some, um, there are some, as I said, just by sheer case of numbers, right? There are going to be so many artists. I mean, I know some fantastic artists that have never had a sniff of awards or whatever. It's like, and that's hard from a career point of view. That's hard, but yeah, at the same time, if you sound like a decorated musician and you've got those awards, the implication is that there's a bit of a buzz around you. And if you're somebody who's promoting a small gig and you want artists to be there who are going to draw a crowd so that you can afford to keep doing it, then that's what you're going to do, right? You're going to back the winning horse, right? And that's just the way. That's part of the game, isn't it? Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, that is part of the game. So, yeah, I hope that's not too wishy-washy. But
No, I don't think it is, but I think it's always nice when you know, promoters and folk clubs take chances on young up and coming musicians, because whatever 5 years time, that up and coming musician might not be up and coming anymore, and they'll always remember that that folk club or that promoter supported them when they were up and coming, and they didn't kick them when they were down. So I think that certainly there's something to be said for, yeah, backing the winning horse, making sure your business you know, the business stays afloat or the club stays afloat or whatever. But there's also something to be said for supporting young and up and coming artists. I'm not exclusively only young, but just up and coming artists, because we remember their support, I certainly think, and we remember the ones that don't support, which is quite funny.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have if it wasn't for venues taking a chance on me on my first, outings and my first tour before that was going on and before there was a buzz around. Then I wouldn't have been able to kind of develop what I do. And yeah, absolutely. It's the lifeblood of the scene to kind of for people to get those opening slots for bigger artists and all that kind of stuff. We need to keep doing that. I mean, even now, we all thrive on that. If you get a support for a big artist, that's a wonderful thing to get. That can make that can be like a huge bit of exposure for you. So yeah. I think people are aware of that. I think I find that generally sort of clubs and stuff that I play at are aware of that. And I've had some, I've gone from, I've supported some fantastic artists, and now sometimes I have fantastic artists supporting me too, which is great, and I love to see that and to see what's going on. And it sounds funny now. There's this, I feel like, what happened, what I was when I started out on my first album, I think I was 22, 23 or something like that. And now I'm, older than that. Wasn't that
I think what's really scary nowadays is that I'm seeing like 16-year-old singers come from Aberdeenshire, and I'm like, just you stay up there, don't you be coming to Glasgow now. Like, it's really scary, because it's all in relativity. Like, I feel I'm getting on and I'm 22, but yeah, really interesting. As I said before, you've had a rather long and storied career already, but in 2014 you began collaborating with Jim Morey for sort of folk rock venture. I think that's extremely exciting. The music is great. The music's innovative. I'm a big fan of what Jim does anyway. I think that he's done what I think a lot of folk singers are scared to do, and I think that is so great. Like, just wonderful. I mean, his album, and there's just heaps and heaps of ballads on it. Some ones which are okay typically from Aberdeenshire, some ones which are okay typically from England. Like, that album, I can't remember the name of it. It's the best one. It's when he's like shooting, it's like dabbing. I don't know. The one
Upsetterer. Yeah.
That one.
Upsetterer. Yeah.
I listened to that for like a whole summer long. I just thought it was so good. And it's really exciting to hear what you guys are doing. You know, I don't think I've seen or heard a cooler version of the Bonnie Banks of Fordy or Babylon. I love what you're doing. However, I know that if I shake things up, if I step a toe out of line, there are always traditionalists who are ready to criticise me. So I'm wondering what your experiences have been in creating this really innovative music with Jim. Quite alternative folk music, but still, you know, the sources are traditional. Some of them are traditional ballads.
Yeah.
So I'm working on caring less, worrying less about, you know, people's thoughts and worrying more about the creative output. Do you have any thoughts, insights, tips on this whole thing?
It's difficult, isn't it? That's a difficult one. I think you've got to strike the balance between totally disregarding your audience and doing what the hell you like, and pandering to them and trying to chase what you think they're going to like, because you never, you know, the second one of those, you're definitely not going to get anywhere. But also, I think, you know, that thing of like, you've just got to do what you're going to do, and you can't, you know, you can't listen to what your audience likes. So, well, you know, I think the truth is you know, the path is the middle way between those somewhere. You know, I think it's important to be aware of who your audience is and what they want to listen to. But I think it's also important to innovate as a musician. And I haven't been able to make the same album twice. I mean, somebody might disagree with me, but you know, I keep doing different stuff because I just get bored of doing the same thing, you know. And I feel like creativity is innovation. That's what it is. You can't just keep doing the same thing. So I think to keep alive creatively, you have to keep moving and changing. And inevitably, when you do that, you will lose some people, and you will find other people that will come with you, will come on board, you know. So, I mean, with False Lights, I think we've probably had both. You know, we play in, you know, like kind of rock. We've done some rock venues and so on, and clubs, and people will go, "Hey, I never thought I liked folk music, but I like that," you know, which is a really great comment when you get that. So yeah, well, folk music can be a lot of different things, and so that's always nice. But then also, you know, we sometimes play at festivals, and people are like, it's a bit loud, I can't really hear the words properly, and you know, and that's fine too. You know, maybe we're not the band for that audience and that for those particular audience members, and that's absolutely fine. You know, there'll be another act along shortly that will be up your street, and I think that variety is, you know, is important. So I'm glad that we're doing False Lights, and that it does what it does, and that it doesn't do whatever you know, it's got its own space. And I know that we won't reach everybody with that. But then what band that's half decent does, really? I mean, like, you know, polarizing bands are generally the ones that are doing something interesting, aren't they? So you know, I think we're sort of happy doing what we do, and to be honest, you know, I also think that if you take a step back and look at it broadly, False Lights is not, it's not like ridiculously off the wall and avant-garde and crazy. It's a contemporary folk rock band. So, you know, we're just a band that, you know, you think of Fairport, and they kind of fused their music with the, you know, the ballads with the rock music of the time. And then, you know, but Jim and I grew up listening to Radiohead and Nirvana, and, you know, the Britpop thing was happening, and that's because of that. That's what we fused with our interest in traditional music, and so we just see it as a continuation of that. You know, it's just a new version of that, and yeah, and we think people get it. I think generally people get it. So
I think it's really great. Like, I think that, yeah, people back in the time, I'm sure they criticised Fairport for being too contemporary. I mean, it's all in relativity. I love the idea. And I love the idea that also you're making folk music accessible to audiences that might not have listened to folk music, you know, for them to say, oh, well, I didn't think like that, but actually I do, because you've made it more accessible and more, I'm not going to use the word mainstream, but like just made it more accessible. And I think that's really, really important, because
oh, thanks.
I think a lot of people are at the juncture where they have to do something new, because we've heard these songs being sung for several hundreds of years, And if we just sing it in the same way, they're going to die out, or the interest isn't going to be there. So yeah, I think that's really cool. I'm
Thanks.
wondering, how did you guys begin to approach and arrange these songs initially when you all got together in 2014? What was what sparked it?
Well, actually, we had we had a writing retreat where we went and stayed in a log cabin. Me and Jim went and stayed in this cabin in the woods, and we took some laptops and some guitars, and we had a few ideas, different songs, and we kind of just thrashed the ideas out. You know, we Jim had some stuff ready, create some demos and some tracks and stuff, and had some ideas, and yeah, we brought it all together, and we just kind of bashed these ideas out for a few days and tried a few different things, and yeah, that's kind of where it came from, really. I mean, we took some songs that from you know, both of us had, like, you know, both of us brought some kind of stuff along that we were interested in doing, and it kind of came from there, really. Yeah.
Great answer. So quite
Thanks.
natural. You know what? You know, it was quite a natural thing to be playing together.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jim and I have very different ways of working. You know, Jim is like a brilliant. He's brilliant in the studio, and I'm not. I don't have that. I'm not a. I'm not technical. I don't. Well, I do produce myself, but I'm not as technologically minded as Jim is. So Jim has a different way of working that uses that facility, whereas I'll just sit with the guitar and mainly just in my voice, and I'll kind of start with that kind of that element, whereas Jim very often starts from a production angle. You know, be thinking about, okay, what do I want this track to sound like eventually? You know, so I kind of go about it like this, and Jim kind of works from the top down a little more sometimes. But between us, that we found that worked really well. I can remember when I for the wife of Ush as well. We've got to talk about it now, but the wife of Ush as well. So great song, and I think Jim sent me the Martin Carthy version of it. I think maybe another version as well. And we're like, okay, we need to do something new with this because Martin Carthy's done it, and he's done it that way. So I found a tune from the Sacred Harp, and from the shape note tradition, and it worked really well as a melody. And I sent over Jim a guitar part and a vocal, and he sent me this thing back that was, well, you probably might have heard it it's the first track on Salva, which is our first album, but I think he said he was influenced by Timbaland, and it's got this kind of clapping. It wasn't the way that I sent it to him, and I was really pleasantly shocked by the way that it came back sounding, because I never would have done that. I wouldn't have even conceived of treating the song in that way, and that was exciting to me, because, you know, if you just sent it back and it sounded like one of the songs from that it would fit on my own albums, then I could have done it on my own album. But the fact that we created this thing that, you know, I think we've created something that doesn't sound like either of us individually, and is its own entity, and that was exciting, and it's challenging as well, because like I said, we were that's kind of where we go. So yeah, it's come together well.
You just, on my end, I didn't get that last two sentences, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like, I can't remember what I said now.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
No, you're totally right. Like, I think it is creating something that sounds different from each of your solo projects. I think that's really important when you're doing something like that, and it definitely hits the nail on the head. So I'm quite interested. How are you kind of getting on with this whole COVID thing? What have you been up to? You also lecture at Leeds, and I think it's so interesting that there's a degree at Leeds College of Music. I mean, as someone who went through the conservatoire degree, I think it's the more degrees to kind of train folk musicians, probably the better, because we're almost moving away from it's very difficult, because I think that I still meet people who can't read music, they can't even read like writing half the time, yet they're great musicians. But I also know people who are heavily involved in academia, you know, they've got PhDs in folk music. me, I feel like I'm trying to get like a nice even ground. But how's your experience been? It looks like a great course.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great thing to be involved in. It's been strange because I started in January and I came in halfway through the academic year, and then the lockdown happened, after a few, what was it, I'd only been teaching for sort of 5 or 6 weeks, I think, by the time that happened. So it was pretty weird, but it's, yeah. So I've carried on. I carried on teaching till the end of term, and then we had kind of bits and pieces going on over the summer. But no, it's been a great thing to be involved in, and I think, yeah, I'm going back to what you're saying. I mean, I think that people can approach traditional music in such different ways, from what you might call the fireside academy, learning in a more kind of a less academic way, through to people who study it, and I think all of those approaches are valid, and I think we have a range of approaches in the students at Leeds in terms of their background and where they've come from. And yeah, no, it's great. It's there's some really innovative and interesting stuff there going on. Everybody did great in their assessments in the summer, and that was great to see. There's a real variety of music going on there. And I learn a lot, like I learn a lot from teaching, because these young people are so innovative and so kind of fresh to the music that it keeps me on my toes as well, so I learn a lot from teaching. I know that sounds a bit of a, what's the word, a contrary, no, not contrary, a paradox. That's no, something like that. It sounds like it shouldn't be true, but it definitely is. I learn a lot from teaching. So yeah, and it's now Leeds Conservatoire as well. Fancy that.
Oh
So we have
yeah.
a fancy name, as well as it's just changed its name in the summer. So yeah, I'm looking forward to going back in autumn, and they're taking me on permanently now, so I'm going to be starting in autumn, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on. I'm going to have some guitar students, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's great.
That's really cool. I was reading a Living Tradition article, I think last month's edition, and it was very interesting. I did actually write in because some of the statements were just ridiculous, but it was about.
You say what you really think, Hein.
No, I do. I totally do. And
Good,
the
you
thing
go for it.
is that I've got reasons for that. I think it was an article. It was kind of like a round table, and they were calculating that almost 51 new folk musicians graduate each year from Newcastle Conservatoire, UHI, and Leeds, I think. So I don't know how they managed to calculate that, but a lot of the statements were kind of rubbish. It was a bit sad. They were saying that, oh, we all go in there expecting to have, touring at the end of it. And we all expect to kind of automatically have a career at the end of the 4 years. And I really mailed back being like, actually, all of my cohort and all my friends worked exceptionally hard to have a career at the end of it. No one expected that, and if they did, they soon realised that they needed graft. So I would go and read that article, because it's really interesting to get different people's perspectives on it. But I sent in this raging thing, and they said they're going to print it in the next art, the next edition. So it is really, really difficult, because so many of the older generation of folk musicians, if I met them, they would go, oh, so you study at the abattoir? Like, they didn't appreciate the fact that I went there. They thought, oh, what are you doing that? But I think it's a great thing. I think it's absolutely wonderful. So yeah, that's what you're up to in the autumn, and that's great work for you to go back to. What are your future plans apart from your teaching, which have you got going on? What's the kind
Yeah.
of future?
So I am working on new music at the moment. So I've just decided to get straight back to writing again after doing the last album. So over the summer, I've been working on new songs, and I'm gonna continue doing that. Probably be the year after next that a new full length album comes out. But I'm going to be doing my tour. That's the thing that's going to be going on. So in spring, hopefully everything being okay, fingers crossed, the dates from this year, both spring and autumn, are being rescheduled for the same places next year. So spring and autumn next year. So I'm hoping that I can finally launch Own Waters in real life. So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to doing next. And and just making more music. That's what I'm going to be doing. Yeah.
That is brilliant. And it is like really clear from your back catalogue and all the projects that you've been involved with and the people that you've worked with and, you know, the great performances that you've done, especially Jules Holland. That's really cool. It's evident, like, your graft and all the work that you've put into your career. You're evidently someone that's just constantly grafting. I'm asking everyone this. If you could give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's interesting. Don't worry so much. You know, don't worry about it so much. Chill out. You know, I mean, I just, I agonize over stuff, and it's important to have standards. But if your standards are so high that it slows you down and it kind of weighs you down, I'm thinking creatively at the moment. I have definitely learned to sort of lighten up a little bit and to not, overanalyze quite so much on what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I think it's important I've said this in when I was talking to Christina, but I think it's important to, for me, music helps make sense of life. Storytelling is what we do to make sense of a bonkers existence that we have and all the stuff that goes on in it, all this kind of rich tapestry that makes up being alive. And we kind of need music to make sense of that. But then as a musician, you also need a life that makes sense of your music. You need to have friends and family and other stuff going on around it. Otherwise, you've got nothing to fuel that space. You've got nothing to fuel yourself creatively, because you don't write music about music. You write music about everything else that goes on in life. So that would be my advice to myself, is make sure you have the balance of those two things. Like, work really hard, but make sure you've got something that's stimulating you from outside of that, not just for your career, but just so that you don't go nuts. There's a lot going on in life apart from music, as wonderful as it is. So that would be what I'd say to myself.
That is such a wonderful answer. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Your latest studio album, Home Waters, as well as your back catalogue, is available to buy physically and also digitally through Bandcamp, Amazon Music, iTunes, and all the other unscrupulous places. So you can also sign up to Sam's mailing list and get more information about when he is going to be on the road through his website, samcartermusic.co.uk. Thank you so much for tuning in.